So yesterday with Bhagavatam, we heard Narada explaining to Vyas how he became Narada in his previous life, who he was in his previous life, and how that led him to become Narada, and how it all revolved around him just hearing Bhagavad Gita, or in other words, just hearing people who had love for Bhagavan talk about Bhagavan. By hearing that, his mind became dedicated to Bhagavan, and he became Narada. Then Vyas, after hearing the basic outline of the story, he asks, well, you just told me the story up to where these they're actually called Bhakti Vedantists, where these Bhakti Vedantists left, and they advised you to keep doing karma yoga, to keep doing your duties with your mom. So what happened after that? Vyas wants to tell me what happened after that all the way up to when you died. And then tell me, how did you go from death to this birth? And then tell me how you remember that previous birth, which is weird for anybody to be able to remember it. I mean, you may have a flash or a hunch, but you have like these really wild details. So how did that happen? And this is a previous birth from a previous universal cycle. So how do you remember it? Those are Vyas's questions. Narada answers the questions. He says, let me just make sure I'm rolling it. Everybody's hearing me. He says, My mother was a simple woman, a servant with no status in society. So like I said, remember this. I was her only child, and she had no one and nothing but me. So for all you guys who are like Narada's situation right now, guys and girls, like you're down and out, just remember that things like bhakti, things can transform you. Narada was like in that situation before. And for all you people who aren't in that situation, and you think about how you treat these people. And this is a recurring theme in the Vedas, that Vishnu or other gods, Indra and so forth, will very often appear before people as very ordinary dogs, animals, poor people, just to see how you treat them. So bear that in mind as you go about making fun of or not giving a damn about the people in the world. But then claiming that you really respect sages or something, or that you really respect God or something. So anyway, Narada's answer to Vyas is, my mother was a simple woman, a servant with no status, and I was her only child. And she had no one, so she had no husband, and nothing but me. I was her only relative, and I was her only possession, her only wealth. So she firmly bound me with the embrace of her full affection. Her only desire was to care for me and protect me. But how could she? She was just like a puppet in the hands of fate, like everyone. This is such a beautiful way that he's thinking about his mom, because you're going to find out that she fails to protect him. But it's not her fault. I didn't know left from right, or before from after. I only knew my mother. This is what he says. Everything to him was his mother. His mother was his whole world. I didn't know left from right or before from after. The only thing I knew was my mom. Now, this is after he has Bhagavad Bhakti. So all you guys who think that a Krishna devotee should not have love for their mother are completely freaking crazy. This is Narada Muni after he spoke to the Bhaktivedantas, after he got practically up to Bhava Bhakti. Then they advise him when leaving, stay with your mother, do your duties. The Bhagavan likes that, so do them for him. Do your duties to your mother for him. Then his life revolves around his mother. And he gives his age, actually. So he says, but when I was 5 years old, the situation changed. So from this week, I was trying to estimate yesterday how old he was when he was with the Bhaktivedantas, listening to them. But he must have been 4 years old or something like that. So he must have been super young and cute and adorable. And this adorable, cute young boy got this serious like character to him because he's poor. He is just sitting there at questioning these sages and trying to serve these sages, and the sages are in love with him, and they stay longer than the rainy season just to teach him more. So then, but he says, so then for like the next year or whatever, he's completely absorbed in taking care of his mom and just being with his mom. Then he says, when I'm 5 years old, things changed. But when I was 5 years old, I went to live with a teacher for my schooling. So he went to school. Basically, in this day and age, we go around 6 years old. So apparently then it was like 5 years old-ish. You go to school. And these days we get on a bus and we go to school every day, and then we come back. But on the weekends we stay home. Those days it was like the student would go live at the teacher's house. The teacher didn't live in a different country like India, and you live in America, and you can't keep any track of your kid at all. The teacher was like in your village with you, but still the kids didn't live in the parents' house most of the time anymore. They went and lived with the teacher. And it wasn't like a schooling system like we have now where you do it for years and years and years. If you're Shudra, then the duration of the education is quite short, a few months. If you're a Vaishya, then it's like a year. If you're Kshatriya, then it takes a few years. And if you're Brahmana, it's a very long education. But anyway, when he was 5 years old, he went to school. When I was away at school, the poor woman, my poor mother, went out at night to milk the cows. That was one of her jobs. As a servant, she had to milk the cows for the family. So on the path, on the way to the cowshed, a poisonous snake bit her on the foot. And thus time struck her down. So when Narada Muni in his previous life was 5 years old, and when he was at school, his mother got bit by a snake and died. You see, this Facebook thing is such garbage. Why am I even going to do this? There's one person watching on Facebook. And you know what's so funny? Like, I have a Facebook page. I would keep doing this. Sorry about that. I have a Facebook page that's like dedicated for bhakti. So like all the people on this page are supposed to be like bhaktas. And there's 3. They heard me complain, and now there's more. But on YouTube there's 29, and this is supposed to be my astrology crowd. Just the quality of devotees is, the interest in hearing Bhagavad Gita is very low. Anyway, I'll keep it on. So, all right. So back to Narada Muni. So what did he feel like when this happened? He said eventually he realized something. So that means at first he had a regular, natural emotional response. Do me a favor. If you are that one person that's now watching on my Facebook page, just type something in like it's me. Because I just want to know who is watching. Eventually, or can I? Oh, it says I don't have any viewers yet. This page is useless. I'm going to stop using this page. Eventually I realized fate is but a vehicle through which God grants affectionate blessings to the devoted. So, I'm just so distracted by this now that I have to end it. All right. So he said, eventually I realized fate is but a vehicle through which God grants affectionate blessings to the devoted. So that means that first of all, Narada, in his previous life, the boy's first reaction was a simple, natural, emotional reaction. He was freaked out. His mom just died. But after he calmed down a bit, thought about it, then he realized this thing, which is a very nice quote, which you should actually think about in terms of what's going on right now with coronavirus and everything. Any difficulty, you should think about like this. Thank you, Davey. He says fate, which is karma, which is destiny, right? Fate is nothing but a vehicle. Fate is just a tool. And what is it a tool for? It's a tool for Bhagavan or God to grant blessings to the devoted. So that's really, really interesting. So he took this negative event in his life, which is the death of his mother, as after getting over the initial shock of it, he was able to see it as everything which happens to me must be a blessing, because everything which happens to me is fate, and fate is overseen by Paramatma, who's basically God. So it can't be an evil thing. So it must be meant for my betterment. So he says, making up my mind like that, I left everything behind and departed northward. So what you should take away from this is you have to make up your mind like this. It's not going to be a spontaneous feeling when something terrible happens. You're going to feel like, oh no, something terrible happens. I wish this didn't happen. I wish there was no coronavirus. But if you think about it for a while and you realize that fate is under the control of Paramatma, not some freaking crazy conspiracy theory. Fate is under the control of God, and God is not evil. So the thing which is happening must have some purpose. If you make up your mind like that, then you'll start to act on it. So that's what he did. He made up his mind that what happened to him with the death of his mother must have some good purpose. And then he thought, what could the good purpose be? Well, maybe it means that now I'm ready to graduate out of karma yoga. Now I don't have any more duties. The sages told me, don't go with them. Stay with your mother and take care of her, and that will please Bhagavan. But now my mother is gone. So I'm going to leave all this crap, this stupid family that employed my mother and this dumb school, and I'm going to just become like the sages. Because that's what I wanted to do before, but because I had my mother to take care of, I couldn't do it at that time. So let me take this as a blessing that now that my mother is gone, which is a shock to me. But the good thing about it is, now I'm free. I have no ties. And so thinking like that, he just left everything. He didn't even go and say, what do I want to take with me? Don't do that if you're thinking about becoming a sage. Should I take my iPad? You just leave everything. And he went north. North is direction for moksha, and all this, the custom. If you're going to practice renunciation in India, is you work north and you get eventually to the Himalayas. All right, so any questions so far? Yeah, I just feel better about this. Only on Facebook, only on YouTube. Great. Yeah, like Teeny says, everything is a teaching moment. That's a nice modern way to say it. Yes, Bardo. Thank you, Sierra. Yeah, I don't think he really had an attachment. but he had a responsibility, and now that responsibility was fulfilled. He has responsibility to his mother. So Bhagavan is not happy with people who abandon their responsibilities, because that means he has to take care of it. You're supposed to take care of your business. Now, so that's why the sages advised him, this, you will make Bhagavan happy if you take care of your responsibilities, but now his responsibilities were over. So he saw it that way, and he went north. Now, I'm glad we still have 15 minutes, because this is great. So as he walked north, he said, gradually I passed from civilization into wilderness. From cities into towns, into villages, into farmlands, and then past. So he was getting further and further away from civilization. That's what you need to do if you want to end it all. You go further and further away from civilization. You go into the villages, you keep going, you keep walking, you get out to the farms. You go past them and you get to the mines and the plains and the valleys. And he said he came into gardens and nurseries and forests as he's walking. He is 5 years old. This is one of the nice also stereotype breakers. Is how a young boy can do this. Then maybe he's 5, 6, something, maybe 7, 8 at the most. Then I entered the hills. So he entered the hills. So he's getting to the feet of the Himalaya. And from there I moved into the mountains that hold many precious metals. I entered raw nature, beautiful and frightening. This is what happens if you get out of civilization. You get in raw nature, which is simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. All around me were trees with branches broken by huge elephants. So it's beautiful and terrifying. There's a huge elephant around somewhere. And pure lakes with lotus flowers decorated by birds and bees. Even the citizens of paradise are attracted to such places. But then I roamed past rows of bamboo and into pens of sharp grass and weeds. I was alone in remote caves and fearsome forests, the playgrounds of dangerous snakes, owls, and jackals. So, in nature, if you get out of society where everybody has a couch and an air conditioner and a heater, and you get out into nature, then you see karma and the world much more clearly, much more easily, that suffering and enjoyment exist side by side and are inescapable. So he walks through these beautiful places that the people in heaven would want to be, and then he walks past these terrifying places where the people in hell would want to get out of. All right there on planet Earth, right next to each other. When I bathed and drank in the pool of a river, this is wonderful actually, I grew up in a regular suburb, and I grew up on Long Island where there's no such thing as a river. When I came out to Japan and see rivers and how they actually work, it's so nice. They make these little pools in certain places, and that's where you swim. So when I bathed and drank in the pool of a river, my exhausted body and soul felt relieved. So it's exhausting. He walked and walked and walked and walked and walked, but then he would get to a pool of a river and feel better. And in an uninhabited forest, remote up in the mountains, I sat beneath the shelter of a banyan tree. You need some shelter from sun and rain, but you're not going to build a house, so you find a really big tree with thick branches. I focused myself, sitting underneath that banyan tree in this remote forest near a pool where he could get relief. He focused refreshment from this pool. I focused myself. Now this is the essence of meditation now, he's going to explain. I focused myself upon the self within myself. Atman yadmani vatmani. You take your Atma and you focus it on the Atma of your Atma, which means you take your mental self and you focus it on the spiritual root of your true identity. So in other words, this is called Paramatma. This is a reference to Vishnu. Vishnu is the self of the self. So you focus on Vishnu, but the way that he presents it is less stereotyped or hackney. He's explaining what Vishnu really is the self of the self. I focused myself upon the self within myself, and I contemplated what I had learned during that rainy season. Gradually, the more I meditated upon the lotus-like feet of the all-attractive, the more my thoughts and emotions became enwrapped in spiritual affection. So the more I thought about what I heard about Bhagavan from those sages when I was 4 years old, in the rainy season, the more I thought about Bhagavan. The more I thought about Bhagavan, the more my emotions became enwrapped in Bhagavan. That's how Bhakti Yoga sadhana works. Eventually, I became very enthusiastic. I became very emotional. And tears of longing constantly rolled from my eyes. It was then that Hadi himself suddenly appeared within my heart. So it's only then, my friends. You can't expect to just walk 5 minutes up the nearest hill next to your house after playing your video games and drinking your sodas, and then sit down underneath the nearest big tree and try to focus yourself on the self within yourself and then see Vishnu. There's a couple of things that you should note that were special about Narada. First of all, he first had the company of extremely elevated people who had very strong bhakti. So he caught the germ of bhakti. Now he had something to work with. He had something to develop. He had a seed to work on. You have to get the seed first. Then, secondly, you should note that he performed all of his conventional duties flawlessly. He devoted himself to his mother 100%. And then was absolved of those duties when they were finished. So you can't just be non-dutiful and break your duties and go out and expect to get bhakti. The third thing is, he did it. Not for 2 seconds a day or 5 minutes a day or a half hour a day or 2 hours a day, but 24 hours a day. He did this. He had nothing else. He didn't have a laptop computer with him in his ashram. And he just did it with his full heart. And he didn't see Hari until after he had tears. So Hari is not bhaktya mam abhijanati. Krishna says in the Gita, bhaktya mam abhijana. The way that you can know, the way that you might know astrology is by studying a book. The way that you know me is by tears, by love, by feeling, by emotion. That's the only way that you know me, because I have to give myself to you. You can't conquer me with your brain, but you can receive me in your heart. And I'm not going to give myself to a person that doesn't want me. So show me that you want me. So once Narada, the boy, previous life Narada, I wish we had a name for him, was crying tears of longing, then Hari suddenly appeared in his heart. At that time, he says, I became completely overwhelmed with powerful expressions of ecstasy. So, completely overwhelmed with powerful expressions of ecstasy. That means his hair was standing on end, he was crying, he was sweating, he was shaking, he was stunned, all those kind of things. A downpour of incomparable divine love drowned me in a flood of spiritual bliss. I could not see a second thing besides Hari. It's not like he saw Hari and then he also saw something else. So it means, like, sometimes you can be talking to one person and thinking about something else at the same time, because the conversation is not so engrossing. The experience of Hari was so engrossing that everything else ceased to exist in his consciousness. Hari became everything which he experienced. And this is Advai Gyan Tattva, which was expressed before, that this is what Hari is. Hari is everything. And when you experience Vishnu Hari, then you're experiencing everything. I cannot see a second thing besides Hari. Hari was everything. Ah! And then he says, ah, aho. Even when he's telling Narada about the story, he gets emotional. Ah, the beauty of the all-attractive intoxicates the mind and makes everything else disappear. Yes, I wish somebody would make a movie out of this. Then suddenly, I lost sight of him. I stood up in distress, like a person who has lost everything. Desiring to find him, I again set my mind into my heart and searched. But in spite of my efforts, I could not see him again. This tormented me. Soon, seeing me struggling alone, he who is beyond reach spoke to me in a deep and delightful voice that pacified my sadness. So first he saw Hari. Then later he tried to see him again. It's not mechanical meditation that produces the darshan of Hari. It's Hari shows himself to the seeker. You don't discover Hari. So much of this yoga is absolutely useless. And so much of our attitudes about spirituality are absolutely useless. It's not a science. It's not a discovery. It's a flirtation. It's trying to get Hari to show himself to you. So, when Narada tried the exact same thing, he couldn't get the exact same result. He couldn't even get close to the same result. But when Hadi saw his effort, he again revealed some aspect of himself to the boy Narada, previous Narada. And this time he revealed his voice. So he spoke and he said, "Sadly, we will not see each other again during this lifetime." So he was also sad. Hadi was also sad that he wouldn't be having darshan with this boy again. "Sadly, we will not see each other again during this lifetime. There are still impurities undissolved in you, interrupting our link. Thus I remain beyond your vision. You saw my beauty once. This will cause your spiritual desires to crescendo. Sinless people like you make their hearts completely pure." So pure people make their hearts completely pure. Sinless people like you make their hearts completely pure by intensifying their desires for me. So people who already have some desire for Bhagavan have to get to this stage. This is the difference technically between Bhav Bhakti and Prem Bhakti. In Bhav Bhakti, there's some sputa drishti, some sputa darshan, some instantaneous vision of Hari. But in Prem Bhakti, there's constant relationship with Hari. The difference is the intensity of the emotion for Bhagavan has to go to the incalculable level. And the way that it gets to the incalculable level is by experiencing a glimpse of it. So sinless people like you make their hearts completely pure by intensifying their desires for me. This quickly creates very strong dedication to me, which will allow you to cast off this deplorable world, which has mixed up caves with bats and spiders next to beautiful lakes with lotus flowers. Be able to get rid of that situation and become my personal associate. You'll be able to be personally with me. And then Hadi actually says, "A mind dedicated to me can never be lost. Even when the universe is destroyed and created, all is remembered by my mercy." So this, by the way, is the answer to Vyasa's question about how could you remember this stuff. All right, I'm going to stop here. Tomorrow we'll pick up from that point. Yeah, Barda, that's Vyasa's question as well. How did he remember all this? And then it's actually by Bhakti. And if you want, I'll start the next tomorrow with that. All right, guys. If you hear, here's a question from Michelle. How can we ever hope to be like Narada? You don't have to be like Narada, but you just have to hear about Narada. If you hear about Narada, just like if you hear about the story of John F. Kennedy, then you start to feel affinity with John F. Kennedy. That's why there's not that many movies about Hitler from his point of view, because nobody wants anybody to feel sympathetic with Hitler's point of view. So if you hear Narada's story, you'll feel, just by the way that we listen to stories, is we identify with the characters in the story. So you'll actually start to feel like that, right? You don't need to be Narada right now, but all we need to do is listen to Narada a lot. Listen to the story often, a lot. Remember the story often, and we'll start to get the same things. Bardo, once again, thank you so much. You're like, there's no need to support, but you're like supporting this whole thing for everybody. So I hope everybody's grateful. Thank you so much, everybody. I shall see you tomorrow.